and with only 2 television channels in his town, he turned to his computer for solace, like so many of us who even had more. He wishes he had discovered free and open source software before the late 90s, because downloading GNU Emacs over an acoustic coupler would have been fun. No, it wouldn't. Different ideas are fun. Sridhar's a former board member of Linux Australia, past president of the Sydney Linux Users Group, currently the engineering manager, CTO, of One Laptop Per Child Australia. An absolutely fantastic project. Please put your hands together and give Sridhar a very warm welcome to Linux.conf Australia 2012.
How's that? Yes, much better. Okay, thank you very much. Yes, I'm the engineering manager at OLPC Australia. So I'll be talking about the program that we do in Australia. OLPC is conducted differently by region, and that's done on purpose, because different countries and different areas have specific needs. So we've chosen to focus especially on Australia and within Australia, especially in the remote area. Where we feel that we can bring a lot of opportunity to children who otherwise might not have it. Now, just a request, please. Please leave your questions till the end. I happen to have asthma, and if I don't carefully control my voice, I end up in a massive coughing fit, and no one wants to see that, least of all me when I watch the video later on. Yep, that works. Okay, so that's our official vision. We're trying to bring opportunity to all Australians. And like I said, the children in remote Australia unfortunately don't have the same kinds of opportunities as children in metropolitan regions. We're in a country that where more than 80% of the population lives along the coastline. And so for issues regarding remote Australia, they're not really well known and understood by the majority of the population, and we think through the provision of technology, through the provision of good educational framework, we can bring the country closer together. I'm going to start with a short video that goes through essentially who we are, what we do, but most importantly the effects that the OLPC Australia program has had on kids and with teachers, educators, and hopefully that should set the stage for you to hopefully understand what I'm saying for the rest of the talk. So let me cue that one up. I just lost my mouse pointer. Oops. There we go.
Ambitious program that's caught the philanthropic attentions of some of Australia's biggest companies.
The One Laptop Per Child organisation was formed in the United States 5 years ago to create an affordable educational device for use in developing countries.
One Laptop Per Child is trying to boost numeracy and literacy rates in these remote communities, giving each child an educational laptop. So far, 1,500 laptops have been delivered to children in remote parts of the Northern Territory in Western Australia, with a plan to distribute 400,000 over the next 5 years.
Laptops are great for kids. They're set up like a game. I mean, when they open them, it looks fun, it's engaging. They can see everyone else that's online, they can chat with each other, and they can play games with each other. And I think, yeah, that connection is really nice.
It'll be a very big change for our students when they're using these laptops, because when we were going through school and we didn't have these advantages like these children are going to have.
One Laptop Per Child program will just provide them with an exposure to new technologies so that they can use that technology for things that they are interested in doing.
Students here, the world ends here, but there's a big world out there.
Having the exos in the classroom has enabled the kids to learn significant computer skills, accessing the internet, as well as word processing. So really, overall, I think the EXO experience in our school has been amazing. The support we've received from OLPC has been wonderful, and I'm just absolutely honoured to be able to participate in this program in our school.
The programs on them are suitable for all ages, all learning styles as well. The students are going to take the EXO and they're going to take ownership of their own learning. I think it's a powerful tool, it's a powerful resource. The students are just going to go full force with it.
The way the world is working, if you want to get a job anywhere, especially if it's off the Mornington Island, those kids are really going to have a really good understanding of technology. So I think in that way it will really help connect them to hopefully future jobs.
Having the EXOs at Maningrida School has been somewhat of a technological revelation. With over 200 devices shared between the hub school and the homeland school, it's just been so exciting to see students and teachers engage with the EXOs.
They use the cameras, they look at themselves and like make funny faces and stuff, and like I try not to laugh. They are having fun with it.
What I would like to say to the corporate partners that have been involved in this program, I'd like to say thank you on behalf of Dhanapalan State School, on behalf of our children and the children of the other schools that are benefiting from this initiative. Our children, while they are remote, need to be able to engage in these technologies so they have an equal chance as everyone else in Australia and the world to engage in that global economy.
Okay, now let's talk about the core principles underpinning what one laptop per child do. Those are the 5 that govern what OLPC do at a global level, and they're just so core. They're not negotiable. But we like those so much we added 2 more in Australia. The teachers are the gateways to the children in the classroom. If you cannot get teachers on board, if you cannot make teachers feel comfortable with an education program, then they're not going to do it. They've got plenty of other things they need to be doing. They need to give lessons and so on. So let's not waste their time. That puts a lot of pressure on us to make sure that whatever we do just works and is really simple, and I'll get into that later on in the talk. The next one's community engagement. We don't want the classroom to end within once the child leaves the school. We want children to be able to leave the school, go back home or go anywhere and still be able to learn. They've got a portable learning device, and for that to work really well, we want the families and the communities that these kids live in to fully accept what we're doing and be fully supportive of what we're trying to achieve. We've got a fair amount of support in government at various levels. That's a quote there from a federal MP. He's taken quite a good look at what we do, and he's come out very supportive of that. Wasn't too long ago, back in November. We're also engaged in ongoing longitudinal studies, collecting lots of data, analysing it, making sure that we have a really good story to tell, that we're delivering real educational outcomes. Good case study there, Dhanapalan State School, far north Queensland. Pretty remote. Get there from where we are in Sydney. It's plane to Cairns, plane to Mount Isa, and somehow get to Dhanapalan from there. And they've had a massive jump in their educational outcomes since implementing an OLPC Australia program. Now, we're not claiming to be a single answer. They've done a lot of clever things at that school, but one of the key things they have done is implement an OLPC Australia across the entire school. And as you can see, the results for the exams for the national curriculum at grade 3 level has in 1 year jumped from 31 to 95%. The quote beneath is from the principal of Dhanapalan State School. He was actually in the video I played earlier. And I love the final sentence where he says that the laptops are their pencil and their book. And what he's getting at there is that in education, we're still stuck with this 19th century way of doing things. Where we're using textbooks, pens, paper. Now, they're good and they're cheap. If they break, you get a new one. That's all well and good. But that gives us, that puts a lot of pressure on us to make sure that if we are to replace those with technology, we do so in a way that is similarly inexpensive and similarly durable and maintainable and sustainable as well. Here's a map of where we've been, where we're going, where we'd like to expand even further. We've got 7,000 EXOs in deployment in Australia. There's 2 or 3 million globally. So this isn't a small niche project, it is quite large. And it also illustrates some of the challenges we face in terms of distance. To get, if you're implementing any kind of technology program and it requires technical expertise to manage or repair, then something breaks in a remote place, you're waiting a long time and it's very expensive. So what happens is that these things get implemented, they might get used a little bit, then they get put to the side when they're found to be inadequate or they're not working the way they're intended to. Which means that we need to build sustainability. We need to make sure that the people on the ground are fully in command of the program. They need to understand how it works, they need to be able to repair it, upgrade the machines if there's a new software version, stuff like that. And we also need to recognise that each of those communities on that map have their own circumstances. They have their own cultures, they're people who have been there for tens of thousands of years. You can't treat them as one just amorphous mass. And so when you build sustainability, you're giving the power to communities to do things the way they like. We have an online training process to make this happen. We do so online because, like I said, very difficult to get out to these physical places. And the idea is that we do not ship EXOs to a teacher who has not completed their online course and earned a certification. The certifications have been very carefully designed so that they're friendly to the target. So, for example, we've got EXO Expert and EXO Certified. They're the two certifications targeted at teachers. The EXO Certified is 15 hours and it counts towards their professional development. So these are skills that are recognised. They can put it on their CV. It will give them a lot of value in the future. If they happen to move to another school, they can call us up and say, hey, I'm at this new school, they don't have EXOs, can you ship me some? I'm already certified. And we'll be like, hey, okay, fine, you can jump the queue, we'll give you your EXOs because we know that you've proven yourself. But to build sustainability, we need teachers to train other teachers. They shouldn't be dependent on us. We like to make the joke that we want to be out of business by 2014. And by that I'm saying that our mission is to get a full educational program to all 300,000 kids in remote Australia by 2014. So if we've done a good job, then 2014 we can say, haha, we're done. Reality is not really that, but it's just funny to say. The EXO Expert program is designed to let teachers train the other teachers in the school. We provide resources and everything they need to make that actually work. We also have an EXO Basics certification, which is for community members, parents and so on who are really interested in what's going on, but they don't need to manage a whole class. And then we've got a couple of technology repair-related ones. There's the EXO-Tech, which might be suitable for an IT teacher. If an EXO breaks, then someone with this certification has the training to test the components and replace a faulty one. But we also want to reward kids who show aptitude. We want the kids to get involved in this process as much as possible. And we've seen time and time again how quickly kids pick up technology. So let's recognise that. Let's encourage that. So we've got EXO Mechanic, which is the child equivalent of an EXO Tech. EXOs have been designed so that they can be pulled apart and put back together by a child. All you need is a Phillips head screwdriver. And they've thought about this to the point where there are extra screws built into the handle. So you lose one, it's like, no problem, we've got a spare. EXO Champions are for kids who help their teacher, help their peers in the classroom. Teachers running a lesson, something doesn't quite go the way they want, a few kids need some help. If another kid starts helping them out, and that happens on an ongoing basis, they show some aptitude across a range of tasks, then the teacher can say, hey, I'm going to make you an EXO champion. And the thing is, those child certifications are awarded by the teacher because the teacher knows best. We're not in a position to know what little Johnny is doing off in Doomadgee. And that training becomes part of a global program cycle. We have schools who demand EXOs from us. Well, they want EXOs rather. They speak with us, and some of their teachers sign up. For those teachers, they go through the professional development. Once they're passed, of course, they get their EXOs, and then there might be more teachers in the school who want EXOs, and they can train each other if they get that EXO expert certification, or they can just connect with us and get connect with our program directly, and get their certification that way. Now you're probably wondering how much this costs. It doesn't cost that much, and I'm talking total cost of ownership. We factor in support, spare parts, training, all of that stuff. We're not a computer company. We're not just selling kit. We don't treat education as yet another market. Education is our market. Everything has been built from the ground up specifically for the purposes of education. So that means we need to get it right, otherwise we're out of business. There's no alternate market here. And so that works out that works out to be $380 per child. But for remote schools that have met the criteria that we feel we need to subsidise, and we use various statistics from the Australian Bureau of Statistics and so on to ascertain this, they only pay $80 per child, which is the cost of training and support. The hardware cost will be totally covered by our corporate sponsors. And when I say corporate sponsors, you can go to our website and there's a list of our sponsors, but we're talking like Telstra, News Limited, Commonwealth Bank, and so on. Didn't want to advertise anyone, but we have support. By the way, I didn't mention at the beginning, at the bottom of most of my slides, I have a URL. That URL is the same, but that has links to all of the references I'm making here, as references for the things I'm saying, I mean. But another thing is, we focus on primary education. The digital education revolution that gets talked about by governments focuses on the upper end of school, the older kids, upper high school. We believe, very importantly, if you remember the core principles I showed right at the beginning, that we need to start with low ages. And this isn't about teaching computers, it's about using computers to teach. The basic literacy, numeracy, and so on, just enhanced by using technology. And lastly, but very importantly, while our focus is on Remote Australia, we are not restricted to Remote Australia. If a school is willing to pay the full $380 per head and the teacher is willing to go through the training, we will ship them EXOs for that class. It's all teacher-based. So if you happen to know a school that might be interested in this very cost-effective program, get in touch with us and we'll be very happy to talk. And you'll see that, that for all 300,000 remote children, that's $114 million. That's not very much at all. Considering the billions and billions of dollars that's spent on education in this country, it's extraordinarily cost effective. Now let's talk about the technology that's underpinning all this. This is the more geeky part of the conversation here. Firstly, the principles underlying anything we develop and release. We need to make sure that technology becomes an integral part of the classroom. It's not a bolt-on, it's not a separate computer class, it's not done in a separate room. The exos need to sit in the same classroom as the kids are in all the time. They need to use them just in the same way as they would a textbook. And again, getting back to my analogy about 19th century learning versus 21st century learning, it's the 21st century. Where's my learning device? We should be having these already. And that's what exos provide. It makes it actually feasible to integrate technology into the classroom properly. But when I say integration, I don't just mean content consumption. We want kids to be productive. We want kids to be able to talk with each other, share information, do things collaboratively in real time. And that's what the exos provide for. They're not just individual discrete laptops. The way they're designed at the hardware and software level is that they talk with each other and the kids can learn collaboratively. And finally, we have an open platform. Everything is based on a free software stack. We're talking Fedora, GNOME, Python, and so on. These are technologies that anyone who's used Linux before should have some degree of familiarity with. And so it is actually Linux, as in Linux with GNU userland, X windowing system, all of that stuff, which means it's quite easy to get into and hack. And while we encourage that, we want everyone to have the certainty, the confidence to do that, because you learn most from your mistakes. We don't want to lock things down to the point where they're not useful, which is the way technology is often deployed in corporate and education environments. We want it so that you can make those mistakes, but then we say, okay, fine, you made a mistake, no worries, recover. Here's the easy way to do it. And I'll explain how in a moment. Well, firstly, we wouldn't have anything if we didn't have these things. Tough, rugged, inexpensive, wonderful machines, proven themselves in the field. Millions of them are out there in the world. Then we have the operating system. OLPC do a great job of making an operating system that works really well in the exos. We've made some further customizations to better suit Australian educational environments, deal with the different kinds of networks we work with and so on. You'll see that there's a picture both of the Sugar learning environment and GNOME. We provide both. We emphasize Sugar in our training because that's a dedicated learning environment, but GNOME is there too if the kids want to do more grown-up stuff, so to speak. This is our software Swiss Army knife. It's actually just a big zip file that a teacher can download and extract to a USB stick, and it lets people very easily, through a nice menu-based interface, reflash their exos if they're stuffed up the software, or perform hardware diagnostics, all sorts of things like that. There's no commands to type, but the cool thing is that this is all done in the firmware. And if you saw any of the previous talks here at LCA about UEFI and so on and what a nightmare it is, I was watching those talks going, man, if only they had open firmware, these problems probably wouldn't be there. And that's the thing, the exos use open firmware. It's a really nice environment to work in. It's got a interpreter for the 4th programming language, which is quite an easy language to learn, and yet very compact and very expressive. And that's what this is coded in. Peripherals. That's a little crocodile made with Lego. We have these Lego We Do kits that schools can purchase from us if they want. and you can see there's a little USB port over there. And they plug straight into the EXO. They can be very trivially programmed by children. There are sensors, there are motors, there are all kinds of little bits and bobs. The programming environments are just drag and drop blocks. So children don't even have to worry about syntax errors because the blocks won't snap together if your syntax is incorrect. If you are interested, we have a demo in the cafeteria area of EXOs, and we have some Lego stuff set up there. XOP, this is our charging rack, and this is something that isn't often thought about. How do you charge the damn things? And this is a nice, safe, inexpensive way of charging many EXOs in one go. You have these charging bricks, which, as you can see there, I would use a laser pointer, but it doesn't seem to work on the screen, just snap together like Lego. And then you have these plastic racks that are very easy to assemble. It's very, very safe for children. All you have coming out the end is that one cable that goes straight into the wall. Because they're daisy-chained, you don't have to worry about power boards or anything like that. They're quite efficient. You can charge over 50 EXOs off a single power point. XSAU, that's software. It's a server component of what we do. It's based on Fedora. You can just install it on any standard PC. What that does, amongst other things, is that it makes the communications between the EXOs, the collaborative experience, just flow better. That the talking between the EXOs over the network is done using XMPP. So anyone who's used Jabber, Google Talk, those sorts of things, it's the same protocol. This is where things get sexy. This was announced at the Consumer Electronics Expo show last week. It's the first time OLPC have moved away from their very successful laptop form factor, and they're moving to a pure tablet device. What's also really nice is that it actually is the same hardware as the latest laptop that they're working on internally. The next laptop will be out, ready for production around the March timeframe. And that represents, the largest change there is that there's a switch to the ARM architecture. It's the Marvell Armada 610 platform. The XO3 tablet has the same one. So a lot of the development that's gone into that tablet, so that laptop, carries across entirely to the tablet. Nice and easy. What we do have to think about are things like touch experience and so on, which I'll get into in a moment. There are some very nice some very nice features. Now this includes some of the optional features. So while the cost is, the per unit cost is intended to be around $100 each. If you include all of those, it's going to blow up. But that's the nature of hardware. But what I love is the power efficiency. OLPC have talked for years about the possibility of using hand cranks and all kinds of weird and wonderful ways to charge their laptops, and some countries do it. It's actually quite effective, using cows to pull a pulley and charge EXOs or something like that, or a car battery. You can do that because the laptops have been designed to be rugged enough to take those really weird varying voltages and power spikes and all of that stuff. The hand crank is now at a 10-to-1 ratio, so that means that you're doing one minute of cranking gives you 10 minutes of actual use. The solar panel, let me switch back to my previous slide. There will be an option for, in the cover, a solar panel with a flat pack battery behind it, and when you can leave that out in the sun, leave it out for half an hour, and then when you're done, just attach it back to the XO, and the XO will get 1 hour of charge off that. So we're talking 2-to-1 ratio there. In typical OLPC fashion, every component has multiple purposes. So the screw points on the sides, there are 4 screws which are designed to open the thing up to service the tablet. Just like the laptop, the tablet is fully serviceable. They also double as charging points. So you put the case back on, it makes contact with those screw mounts, the XO charges. It's quite nifty. And you can also see that there's a real USB port there, so you can do USB master stuff. This is going to go, whoops, that wasn't good. Apologies. Don't know what happened there. Demos never work. Okay, this is where I get controversial. Everyone's heard about the Linux desktop, year of the Linux desktop, it's coming, and I genuinely think that we can make 2013 the year of the Linux tablet. And by that I mean Linux as we know it on our desktops, on our servers. I'm not talking something with a lot of proprietary bits. I'm not talking something that just has Linux, the kernel, and then some odd or proprietary user land on top of that. I'm talking about Fedora, GNOME, those standard technologies. We can make this happen. And where OLPC come into this is making a really good meld of the hardware and the software. They've proven their aptitude at doing this with the laptops. They can do it again with the tablets. And the free software community is great at writing really good software. We know that. That's why we're here at LCA. And that combined with the hardware engineering of OLPC, delivering a physical product that is designed specifically to run that free software. We're not talking hobbyists and hackers buying something that was running another operating system and then trying to shoehorn Linux onto it and then finding half the hardware doesn't work because we don't have the drivers. We're talking it actually works, something that will work. But to make that work, we need the help of the free software community. And I already explained earlier that we're talking a large install base. At the moment, 2 to 3 million. I expect that to explode with the advent of the tablet as we look to make that more widely available. We've already started doing that in Australia by increasing our scope from just remote areas to metro areas. Circumstances depending, we might be interested in expanding that further and making it more widely available in other ways. But to do that, we need to actually have a product that's worth doing that with. And I actually have a prototype touchscreen device here at the conference, and we've been demonstrating it for the last couple of days over at the cafeteria area. And so feel free to come around and have a play. And I've been amazed that with no special touchscreen development, it still works reasonably well, given that they made some really good design decisions right at the beginning with Sugar. But to have a proper, really, really slick device, we'd love to get GNOME Shell running on it. We need to think about the user interface for a pure touch environment, not, oh, this works in touch, but then I need to switch to the keyboard for this sort of thing. That's where we are at the moment, but it's a prototype stage, so I can talk about that. I can say our product isn't ready yet. We also would like to have like a first-class web browsing experience. So things like integrating things like WebKit into the platform would open possibilities to have activities coded in standard web technologies. And when I say activities, that's what we call applications. And they're called that because we emphasize the active nature of them. We want kids to be creating things with them. They're not applications that are more about consuming content. So if you are interested, please grab me. It actually is really easy to contribute to some of the stuff we do. It's not overly complicated. Some of those things on the list might require some special expertise, but you look at the top one, testing, you don't need to be technical to do testing, documentation, so on. Documentation is a really important one because free software developers typically don't like to write documentation, but when you're dealing with an educational environment, they need stuff to be properly documented. A teacher does not have time to mess around with features or with, oh, this icon is now here. They'll understandably so, probably go, oh, well, you know, this isn't as I expected, well, and I need to continue my lesson. I'm going to put this aside and continue with what I know. So to make technology in the classroom work right, it needs to be predictable. It needs to be properly documented. we're going to, in the fairly near future, make available prototypes for development. These at the moment are intended to, they're laptops, but they'll have touchscreens fitted onto them. And what that means is that you can actually hack directly on them. And you have some degree of certainty that what works on that will also work on the XO 3 tablet. Again, get in touch with me if you're interested. Well, that's the end of my talk, so we can move on to the QA session. And yeah, that's how to get in touch with us.
If anyone does have some questions, please you make your way down the front because it's a bit easier that way.
Hi, I'm really impressed by the work that's been done. I noticed that it's regional, but it's also open to any school, any class. I'm interested in and have personal experience with low socioeconomic situations where the parents can't actually afford to buy a computer for the children, let alone they can't afford to put clothes on the children's back or send them to school. For instance, I think I'm correct, 600,000 people in Australia don't have the mum or dad working, and that's a poor environment to actually encourage the children to even learn. So we don't just have the problem in regional Australia, we also have the problem in our forgotten suburbs in our major cities as well. And one thing that's actually, I think the Smith family is somewhat addressing that, but I'm thinking it would be really beneficial to address it with the laptop program, and also to the people, for instance, that take Centrelink benefits or on pension that can't afford to buy a laptop that find even $50 or $20 per week difficult to make the bills. So I guess with that rambling introduction, how can we expand it so that we can address the computer literacy in these low socioeconomic families?
Okay. Firstly, before I answer the question directly, I'll just say we're not a computer literacy program. We're really about using technology to achieve standard education outcomes. Computer literacy is a nice side effect, and that's great, but that's not our primary focus. Now, to answer your question more directly, I totally agree with you. I don't like to use words like poverty and so on, but I can't think of anything better at this present moment. That is not confined to remote Australia. The reason why our primary focus is on remote Australia is because we feel that hasn't received enough attention. And if we try to expand our scope too far, we will be ineffectual. We don't have any specific programs to manage people who live, for instance, along the coast, who are in trying financial circumstances. I'd love to see something happen, and I think we should. I like to talk with people to make that sort of thing happen. So. Yeah, no answers, but we'd like to see it happen, and we'd be willing to participate. Yes.
So I have two questions. The first one I hope is rather simple: software distribution. So you guys are delivering laptops to remote communities and what have you with limited bandwidth. What's the model of software distribution that you guys have applied?
Yes, well, just about every school has some form of internet connection. Now, that's primarily satellite, and satellite is expensive and bandwidth limited, and particularly when you have every single child with the device and they're all downloading updates, that can be a problem. We have to work within the confines of what we get from the departments of education. Some schools have offered to pay themselves to increase their own their Wi-Fi networks and so on, but they themselves are limited in what they're allowed to do. For software distribution, what we've been doing over the past year is using that XOAU USB that I referred to earlier, had a slide about, and making it really easy for a teacher to download a new version of the distribution and upgrading the XO wholesale. There also is a system known as NAND Blaster. What that does is one XO will wirelessly broadcast a software image out to as many other XOs as you want. And it's doing so using multicast, so it pretty much scales as far as you want it to scale. When it comes to individual software updates, Sugar activities are very discrete. They're often very small. So you can generally go over to the Sugar Labs website and download a new activity or a new version. There is a software update function that lets you just automatically check online for new versions of activities, and we carefully control what versions of activities we release so that we make sure it actually is tested and it's suitable for education and all that stuff. And then the XOs will just automatically receive those updates. For system updates, we're working on using Yum to deliver those. Being Fedora-based, that seems to work pretty well. And we're currently just working out the kinks to make sure that it works in low bandwidth environments and that you can recover from failure and that sort of thing. Yes, Donna?
Sridhar, thank you. Awesome. It's so cool to see the progress. How have you gone with different departments of education? Because you're working, it looked like almost across the entire country. Have you found differences in the different state departments of ed? We have. We've had the most traction in the NT. They seem to be the most cooperative. Probably next after that would be Queensland. And the other debts are still quite new to us. I don't think we have anything in Victoria, but I don't know if any parts of Victoria are classified as remote Australia. I don't have the stats on that. We do have some in Tasmania, and there's some. I think what makes the difference is when you really go for the grassroots support, and some teachers really grab this bull by the horns and they show an amazing amount of enthusiasm. And when you have enough of that happening, that creates pressure on the decision makers higher up, and that filters its way up. And we've found that doing so that way creates something that's much more organic and ultimately more sustainable and more successful, rather than a top-down approach where teachers and communities feel like they're being dictated to.
Hi, I think what you guys are doing is really awesome. I have sort of two questions, one technical, one social. On the technical, I noticed you mentioned it's a Marvell chip, and I wonder if you guys are going to use your economy of scale and your influence on Marvell to actually make it so that the devices have, say, no binary blobs and they're actually open, so that people can really hack the devices and keep control of their own system?
I love that question. That's one of my favorites. And I have a slide. I have a slide where I make kind of passing reference to it, if I can kind of go back to it, where the Make It Happen slide. And I make a reference to porting GNOME to OpenGL ES. What's going on here is that OLPC do have entirely free drivers for what they do. I believe there might be some firmware blobs. I can't answer the question for sure, but nothing that runs on the CPU, to the best of my knowledge, is proprietary. That means that there is a free software graphics driver. However, because we don't have full access to the documentation, it does not utilize the 3D acceleration hardware to its fullest extent. I've been told that I think it's on the current XO 1.5s, you can get Quake 3 going at 30 frames a second. So Quake 3 is a pretty old game now. With that said, that was in itself hard to do. That's quite an accomplishment. And seeing what's been done in communities like Nouveau and so on, they took years to come up with what they did. And I use Nouveau on my system, and it's fantastic. But for a smaller effort like OLPC to do that, they've got a smaller engineering team and lots of different priorities. That's probably not the best use of their efforts. My thought is at the moment, maybe we can take this conversation offline and talk more about it in the future, but after this talk. But to have a good OpenGL type GNOME shell experience would require the binary blob, because the free software driver just isn't good enough, and we don't have enough to write a good free software driver. On the GNOME side, these mobile devices run have hardware and drivers that assume OpenGL ES, which is a subset of the OpenGL that you run on your desktops. So the work on the GNOME side needs to be to get GNOME working on that particular subset. I think there's work being done there. I don't know how far along the track it is.
I'll be quick with my second question, but I noticed on the slide you say telepathy, so I assume that you want kids to be able to XMPP jabber chat or something like that with each other?
Well, a lot more than just jabber chatting.
Yeah.
XMPP is core to what you do in Sugar, because we want every activity to be able to collaborate, to stress the ability for kids to be able to share resources. An example is the write activity, a fairly simple example where kids, if you've ever used Google Docs, the word processing application in Google Docs, where someone types something and then the other people connected to it see what you're typing in real time. Similar sort of thing, but it's done without need for a server, and it's done using an entire free software stack.
So my question about that is, how will you ensure the privacy of different people when they chat? For example, off-the-record messaging by Ian Goldberg has perfect forward secrecy and allows for peer-to-peer, no-server communication of encrypted chat, so people can't surveil these children, because otherwise you have these like giant devices where people are putting their entire lives into them and they communicate with each other. If it's not encrypted, if it doesn't have forward secrecy, it's sort of like the ultimate surveillance device. So the social question is, how are you protecting those children from that kind of surveillance?
I think most of that comes down to training. You need to train kids how to use technology in the most appropriate way. When it comes to the remote context, it's not really a huge concern. I would like to, I hear what you're saying, and I think if we were to get something like that working in a seamless way so that the parents, the kids, the teachers don't have to think about all of this encryption, then it can work. Getting back to that slide I had earlier about our technology priorities, the ideas governing what we release, if it's not transparent, then it's not workable. I have a strict rule saying no command line, for instance.
Hey Sridhar, two sort of related questions. NAPLAN results are at the best of times a huge political minefield. Now, with where you had that Queensland school, having the principal really backing your case is good, but do you find in other cases your story getting lost in the noise and fighting over, the next round of NAPLAN results? And the other part of the question is, if you're dealing with it on a teacher-by-teacher basis, do you see the situation where one teacher has a class, they're using it for education, but then next year students move on to another teacher who has no interest in it and the whole process breaks down?
Yes, okay, two great questions. Answering the first one, I don't think we've necessarily been around long enough for the politics around NAPLAN to seriously burn us in any way. We have to work with what we've got. So it doesn't matter what my opinion or what my organisation's opinion of NAPLAN is. It's there. We've got to live with it. We are engaged in much more detailed evaluation and analysis of what we're doing, collecting statistics and so on. And with that said, it's all above board. So it's done very professionally. We're actually working with the same people who have performed research into and professional, proper, official evaluations of other technology in schools programs. And I think once we, over time, collect that data, then we'll be less reliant on stuff that might be controversial, such as NAPLAN. Now, sorry, I cannot remember your second question.
Moving on to a teacher who...
Yes, good, great question. Okay, for teachers who may leave, and then perhaps another teacher comes in and they don't have a certification or whatever. This is a problem. Teacher churn is a big thing in remote Australia. In the Northern Territory, I've been told a teacher sticks around for about 8 months on average, which means which means that you can go through all this trouble of getting a teacher up to speed, and then they leave, and then this school has XOs, and no one knows anything to, no one knows what to do with it. We're limited in what we can do because we're not going to wield a sharp pointy stick or anything like that. What we can do is say, hey, new teacher, you've got XOs in your class, here's your opportunity to earn a certification, have something nice to put on your CV. It doesn't take much of your time, it counts towards your professional development, and you need to do professional development anyway. So hey, why not?
What's the $380 includes the teacher? The $380 includes the teacher certification?
Yes.
And is that done on site, so someone comes to the school, or does the teacher go?
It's completely online.
Oh, it's all online?
It's all online because we've found that, given the vast distances involved and the fact that even if we were to travel out to a location as we used to do, we don't get much time with the teachers anyway. Our old deployment model was very much travel all the way to that place, spend a week. The teacher's busy doing their classes. You don't want to waste their time teaching them how to use XOs, and they're not in the right headspace anyway. So it needs to be completely online, and then it can be done in parallel. You can reach many, many teachers in one go.
I just wanted to follow on from the lady at the front's question about the poor people in the city. One of the things that we have in the cities, particularly Melbourne and Sydney, is we have community groups that recycle computers and give them to people on welfare. But you don't have that so much in the country, so it's good that they're focusing on the remote areas first, because there is some, although limited support in urban areas. Melbourne, for example, has Computer Bank. Sydney used to have Computer Bank. There's a few groups like that help with that. And they're mostly open source based. But Sridhar, my question for yourself was, you've got great spread and coverage across the country, except Victoria and except South Australia. Well, is there any background to that?
That's a good point. I didn't even mention South Australia. South Australia is picking up, and there are some teachers there who have shown a remarkable degree of aptitude. And I think we're still a fairly young organisation. We've officially been in place for 2.5 years, and we've been evolving our program. So our program in its current form that I just presented is less than a year old. And South Australia, I think they only started getting XOs in 2011. As for Victoria, I think it's more because I don't know how much of Victoria is classified as remote and actually meets our standards for actually subsidising a laptop rollout. But given I've got a mental map of Victoria in my head, I don't think really any of it is remote. Someone please correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay, we might have to stop now. We have gone a couple of minutes over time, not disastrously so. We do have a little gift, Sridhar, from Linux.conf.au Australia 2012. You've got yourself a glass penguin plated in Ballarat gold there. And I'd also like to give my thanks to Katrina and Jeremy, who are up there in the AV room, who have been working away all day. So could you please put your hands together for Sridhar and for Jeremy and Katrina.
Thank you.
We now have an afternoon tea break, and we'll be back at 3:40.